Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Supergirl as well as the latest episode of The Walking Dead. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I go to a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about the season premiere of Supergirl, you can skip what I had to say about this week's episode of The Walking Dead. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is the season premiere of Supergirl, a great season premiere. So there's quite a few things we got to run down about this premiere. It's so interesting because for Kara, she's kind of going a little more worldwide because she's kind of helping all over the place because Superman's not on Earth. Apparently he's on Argo. It didn't even cross my mind to think about that. Like Argo and that whole situation is like, that would be like a crazy moment for him because it's like for him, I'm assuming, you know, even amongst this continuity, the only ties he's ever had to his Kryptonian past were I'm blanking. Fortress of Solitude. Jeez, I blinked on that super hard. So obviously this is a way to get to know, well, for one, his aunt, as well as other people. But it's also, you know, probably like he's probably there, probably acting on behalf of Earth too, kind of being like, you know, a intergalactic, you know, representative of Earth, I guess, in that sense. Is that kind of role he kind of plays in the comic books too? Like, especially with a lot. I mean, sure, that's what the Lantern Corps kind of plays to a certain degree. I mean, at least Hal or John, whoever the Green Lantern is in that particular continuity. But nevertheless, I guess it kind of just all works out the same. It's just kind of interesting. I mean, it's not, well, it's actually quite far out of Earth's normal reach, isn't it? I'm like I said, I'm going on a tangent. Nevertheless, obviously, you know, Kara has that situation of like, she's happy. It's like, oh, everything's good. Everything's great. What I like is obviously like, there's a whole, resurgence of people. Like, there's a lot of like recognizable actors in this. For one, it's Rona Mitra. Mitra, who plays, Mercy. And it wasn't until later on that it's kind of like, it's like, oh yeah, she used to work for Lex until she turned state evidence. And it's like, I don't know comic books, but is that supposed to be the character? You remember from the animated series, the driver that Lex has, who's kind of like his security, which Mercy was his security. Is that supposed to be who she is? If so, I'll be like, that's immediately where my mind went to, especially because later on she fights Alex and she's pretty good hand to hand. But because if I remember like his driver, his security detail, she was like super badass in the cartoons too. So I'm wondering if that's supposed to be the same character, which is very interesting if that's the case, that she out of anyone would betray him. But I guess it's kind of like their cause is bigger than just him. Like eventually Lillian picked up the calls anyway. So I guess it's kind of like, you know, as long as the cause is being held, who cares who's at the forefront of it, essentially, I wonder. But that was kind of what was kind of back in my mind. Fiona, who was running that little like alien group. Most recently, Vicky, who played Vicky in the Good Place. Also, I could be remembering this wrong because I have yet to rewatch like the second to last season and the last season. I think that's it. But wasn't she the mother that Gus dated for a while in the later parts of Psych? I could be wrong. Like I said, I haven't rewatched it. And there's also Dr. Voss. It's Phil/Flesh from Van Helsing. So it's just like, it's all over the place. Like, it's you. It's you. So I thought that's kind of pretty neat. Even like Otis, Mercy's brother, I recognize that actor. He's most recently he played Emmett on the final season of the originals. Even like, there's a dude that pops up at the bar. He was the security guard that survived the whole Max Rager situation at the end of season 2 of iZombie. Like I said, it's just a lot of stuff like that. You're just like, hey, I recognize you. But nevertheless, I'm done with my like little actor thing. But what I liked about this episode, and I thought was kind of pretty neat, is the fact is that Kara isn't willing to see, like John shows up and everything. He's like, oh, hey, like, oh, this is probably connected. But Kara isn't willing to listen. And later on, it kind of makes sense why she's not. Because for her, it's kind of like, you know, the world's great. Like, everywhere I go, I've been loved. Like, yeah, there might be some humans here and there who hate. Because interestingly enough, it hasn't come up as much since season 2. Season 2 was like the big point of like contention against aliens. I mean, subsequently, you know, like the whole like, because it's happened more and more. They don't reference it a lot, but I assume it still counts towards a continuity. I think it still does. It's the whole like Kryptonians invading in season 1, and then you had the Daxamites in season 2, and just the alien situation in general. And then last season, the other Kryptonians, the world killer situation. So it's like that snafu. So that just like probably heightened it even more, which I just like that, this situation is just kind of built upon that. Like the hate's already been there, but Kara just kind of not been exposed to it a lot. It's also that thing of what you can make the argument, like maybe it's just her being super blind and naive to a certain degree, which isn't bad. It's just because it's like for her, it's like she has a very positive experience, which John was like, well, yeah, because you look human, you look the most human, so of course people are going to treat you different. But for Kara, it's like, no, they treat me like this because I help people, I'm good. Like that's what people recognize me as a hero, not just because I look kind of human, so they tolerate me being, because it's just, because also at the same time, it's like if you give in to negativity thinking like that, she's being very optimistic. And so I guess she feels like because she even kind of says it, like if she lets go of that, she's afraid that it's just all, because everything's been so perfect, everything's been running smoothly. Yeah, she's been kind of like multitasking, but everything's been good in general, no like big threats, because it's subsequently been like 3 months basically since season 3's finale. So I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective, because every time John would kind of bring up something like, oh no, it's this, like maybe you should think about there's some connectivity to this, because she just wasn't willing to see it, because I mean, at the same time, it's like, once again, she's optimistic. She wants to give human beings the benefit of the doubt. It's like, oh, it's some people here and there, but how would like a robbery, which that kind of sucked, they cut off Voss's tusk like that. But you can also understand, because she's like, oh yeah, that was like, they used that to get into, that like, there's no way this was a hate crime. And then, we know it kind of was, because even Otis was kind of like, yeah, we might as well make you even, because as you can see, they only needed 1 to get in. But 2, it was also just kind of like, why would a robbery and some random act of violence really be kind of connected? You wouldn't really kind of lump them together. I did like that kind of like badass like teamwork where they kind of took Supergirl down, like the gravity cuffs I thought was a pretty nice touch. And like the disorientating her with the loud sound, I thought that was kind of like a nice 1-2 punch. But then when she did kind of come to realize, like, she ended up, like, with, the DEO's help, she ended up tracking it down. It's like, oh yeah, like, and she finds out, like, oh, this is like a network. It's like a large scale thing that even regular people, this isn't just Cadmus people, these are regular people. And it kind of hit her harder, because even she said it later, and I thought it was such a good line of like, I know how to deal with villains, but how do I deal? These are people, just regular people who are just like, hey, like, these are just like people I would save. But to be fair, that's what a lot of, like, look at the Luthors, like, all they are. They might be super villains, but they're just regular people too that you would normally save. But I guess it's kind of like you just kind of put them in a different category because they are the villains, because they're already established as villains, but these are just people who are filled with hate and contempt because you're different. And it's just like, how do you really fight that? Like, if it's like a villain, it's like, okay, I can punch and I can knock you out, but like, people's hate, how do you fight that? Especially because these are humans, and it wouldn't be fair for you to confront them like that. So how do you'd have to go about changing someone's heart, and that's not the easiest thing to do. All the while, you had the whole Lena actually visiting Lillian. I did not expect that situation. I thought that was pretty neat. I was like, why would you come visit your mom? Right. I was like, the Jimmy situation. It's like, obviously you must be trying to get some help from your mom, which I thought that's ultimately what she was trying to do, which she kind of was. She kind of went about it a very sneaky way. She didn't directly ask her mom for help, because I guess she felt like if she directly asked her mom might play some games and might not really help her. So I thought that was kind of interesting, because she ended up having to manipulate her mom, because it's like all this stuff about Jimmy, because like the DA's trying to indict him, but Jimmy's like, no, I want to handle this on my own, because like you've dealt with this whole criminal activity in your family. I don't want you to kind of have to take steps back just to try and help me. Just be by my side. That's enough. Your support is enough for me. Because we also learn a little bit, like the fact is that Sam's working at Metropolis. She's running L Corp there. And so, that was kind of nice. Just little winks and nod to be like, oh yeah, these are where these characters are now, what they're up to. So I thought that was kind of pretty neat. Because I was wondering about that whole Bruno thing about like, oh yeah, he's laundering money. Oh, he betrayed Lexington. I was like, where's that going? Because in the back of my mind, I was like, is that Bruno guy secretly going to turn out to be the main antagonist or something like that? It's like, no, he's just a means to an end for Lena to leverage the DA to go after Bruno and not Jimmy. Which, when it was all said and done, Jimmy's like, oh, thank you for not doing anything. And you know, she feels a little bit bad, but for her, it's like she would do whatever it takes to save Jimmy because things were looking bad in the DA office. Because she even says it herself, like obviously a lot of people she loves kind of end up behind jail. The last thing she'd want to see is Jimmy. And I think even though she was kind of lying to her mom, because it's hard to say like when she was having that conversation with her mom, like how much of it was lies and what wasn't, because she was like, oh yeah, all the like devices she made to make it so the aliens look more human. She's like, oh, it's a means to an end. It's just for me to, you know, it's all to fund my research, which we kind of found out. What was it called again? The rock that she kept that no one knows about that she's working with. Isn't it Eve? I'm curious to see that kind of circle back around, but like, you know, that whole thing, like that's some of the research she was working on. And she had talked about the fact is that, you know, it's just meant to fund that. Now, I don't know whether she was just saying that to get her mom's guard down, which maybe that is the case. And I don't know, like it's hard to say because you can tell Lena is kind of going down that path. But in her mind, like everything she does is kind of like, oh, it's the right thing to do. It's for the greater good. But at the same time, it's like, well, you know, your mom and Cadmus have made that same argument, I'm sure. It's just kind of like, it's a slippery slope. It gets to that point where you start going like further and further across the line, justifying your actions. But I don't think Lena's necessarily there yet, but you can tell it's kind of like, you do some stuff that I don't know. It's really hard to say. So I'm curious in the end, like also her saying like, oh, like, I've kind of been on an island on my own and I just want to rebuild a lot of relationships that are kind of broken. Even with you, you're my mother, no matter how complicated things are. Even with Lex, there were good things. So like a lot of that seemed like it was BS just to kind of get her mom's guard down. But at the same time, it kind of feels like maybe there was some truth to that, which also made me go, oh, since you're building relationships and stuff. And at that point in time, I was like, does that mean things between you and Supergirl? What does that mean? Because when they ran into each other at the prison, it's kind of like, you can definitely tell things are still awkward. Like, there is still contempt from Lena. You can tell it just in the way she like responded to Supergirl. So there's that. But also makes you wonder will there be any remedy to that situation or not. So, but even when it was all said and done, you can tell Lillian was still kind of impressed by her daughter. It's like, oh, look at you being so kind of being a little cutthroat, doing what you need to get what you want. So it kind of worked out in the end. But sadly, Jimmy won't get, well, great. The fact is Jimmy won't be charged for any of his previous actions as Guardian, but that means that he can't do anything going forward because if he comes up as Guardian again, he will be arrested, which is kind of interesting. I mean, obviously, like Oliver had his whole situation with that in that regard, but like no one had proof that he was a Green Arrow at the time. So now Jimmy is like, oh, you're Guardian. We see Guardian. We're coming for you. So I don't know, which is definitely going to be interesting. I'm surprised that didn't impact business too much. I guess like having a vigilante, like a like hero at the forefront. I wonder is that going to mean anything going forward, especially because it's like, oh, you're a hero, but you're a human hero. Yeah, that's what we need more. We don't need more of those alien freaks like Superman and Supergirl. You know, it makes you wonder if something in that regard. So we'll kind of have to wait and see. But also, like, the fact is that it's starting the stuff of being like, oh, yeah, Lena's starting to do stuff more and more behind people's back, which she was trying not to do that stuff. Which, once again, she got super pissed at Supergirl for doing a lot of stuff behind her back. And it's kind of like, you're doing that to someone that you love and care about, too. So it's going to make it a little bit more icky and just kind of shady. So we'll see ultimately where that goes. Other elements to this episode, I really like the whole Brainy and Alex getting at each other. She's not liking the way Brainy handles things, and she's kind of like, you don't leave here, and you don't breathe out my permission. And he's like, can I breathe now? And even at one point, dresses up like Winn is trying to act more like Winn. And he realized, like, all the way he's handling things so far isn't working. Just because things worked in the past doesn't mean it's going to work here. And even then, like, him and Alex haven't found their chemistry yet. And for her, she apologized because she's like, yeah, you're right. I'm not very good at change. And the fact of the matter is you aren't Winn, so I shouldn't be kind of holding that against you. The fact of the matter is I wasn't thinking about the fact is I'm not the only one that lost a friend. You lost a lot of friends. You basically left your entire life behind Yes, forward because of they're actually in the future. Shut up. Like, no, I mean, I was saying that in the sense of like that's what Alice was basically saying to him when he corrected her on that front. But I also love it where she was just kind of like, oh, we'll kind of get there. She gave him one punch, and he's like, we can make that work. And then he tries to punch her back, and she knocks his hand away both times. He's like, just let me. And she's like, also stop wearing kind of clothes like Wendy. He's like, yeah, you're right. For the love of, for the love of God, these clothes are very restricting. So I really like that. What was also interesting too was the whole like Mercy and Otis situation too. Like it seemed like she was able to willing to sacrifice her brother. I was like, when it was all said and done, I was like, oh wow, is she really about to do that? I was like, is that to make sure that he doesn't talk? And it's like, oh no, Supergirl help me. I was like, what is that? Oh, bulletproof vest. So it was. It's like, did you really think my sister would shoot me? Part of me is kind of like, honestly, yeah, I think she would. If it meant help for the cause, I think she would shoot you. Like, even if you weren't wearing a bulletproof vest, that's just how I feel about it. But, like I said, we could be wrong about that. So, another aspect of this episode I really like is the fact is that Kara is kind of taking another, like, young reporter under her wing named Nia, and Nia is so much like Kara to the, like, she's like, oh, there's all this and this and this and that happened, and you're Miss Danvers. Oh my gosh, it's like, you could just call me Kara, and just like the interaction and stuff. And then Kara being like, oh my God, you're me. You're just like me to the point it's eerie, which is like, yeah, because she even brought Kara a latte and stuff like that. It's like, oh yeah, Miss Cat said that you would want. And I'm like, because I'm sure because I interpret that as being a joke of it being like, Kara always had to run and get stuff for, Cat, so it's just kind of interesting for her to be like, oh, Cat saying like, oh yeah, you love these lattes and stuff like that. Maybe in Cat's mind, it's like, oh yeah, Kara loved all of these, or maybe that is just because Cat is very observant and realized like, oh yeah, Kara likes these. But I thought that was kind of a very nice moment between Kara and Nia, like Nia kind of explaining, it was kind of beautiful, like why she wanted to take the Fashion District article, because it's like, oh yeah, like it's kind of a way of expression and it tells so much about yourself, but it's also like what that can mean for the community. It can mean turning like what was once a crime-driven area into a nice, colorful place while also giving you job opportunities and stuff. Like, there was a lot to that, and she kind of like presented it very well. And you could tell there was passion behind it. She's like, go tell James. But when the time came, she didn't stick up for herself because she was like, yeah, she kind of she was a little afraid. I didn't even like Kara's response of being like, yeah, I know. Like, you get those moments where you kind of that, like, no, you're not afraid. And then something hits you and then you kind of go barrel down that hole again, which she was kind of going through the similar situation. But she's like, what you have to do is kind of pick yourself back up and kind of do what you have to do. And she was just like, TikTok. And it's just like, at that moment, I was like, you do realize it. And the moment I start thinking that, Jimmy says it too. It's like, you're turning into Cat, right? She's like, what? No, the way you're acting, the way you did that right now. She's like, oh my God, I'm turning into Cat. It's like, I love that. Like, that's nice, creating that like relationship right there. Like, now Kara has her own Kara to take under her wing, like Miss Grant. So I just thought that was kind of like, it's all kind of coming full circle in that regard. So I thought that was kind of beautifully executed in that regard. There's also the president being outed as an alien, because I think I let that slip my mind. I was like, all right, yeah, the public doesn't know that she's an alien. Only if like the DEO knows that she's an alien. Well, even then, did everyone at the DEO know? I'm assuming. I think they did. I don't remember, but yeah, because I was wondering about that, because I was like, oh, at the what is it? At the Camp David summit thing, like there was a bullet coming towards one of her security, and she pushed him out of the way, and it looked like nothing happened. But then later, I was like, "Oh, what happened with that? I thought she got shot, but it looks like she's okay." And it's like, no, because it was long enough to reveal her human form. Maybe that was the whole point. I mean, they probably just took advantage of the situation. I mean, to be fair, like, not let someone leak that footage or something. I mean, to be fair, like, this group, which I'm wondering, like, they're ex-Cadmus and stuff like that, but are they part of Cadmus? Because it's interesting too, because like, Kara was like, okay, Supergirl was like, oh, tell me where the location they would be. It's like, oh, do you want domestic ones or international? Which kind of shows you just how widespread it is. Which even that was kind of another point of like, this hate isn't just local; it's kind of widespread. So there's that whole aspect to it too. So I thought that was kind of interesting in that regard. So I don't know whether this main antagonist, which we'll just call him Agent of Liberty for now because he doesn't have a specific name. I'm sure he does in the comic books and stuff like that. If he turns out to be a comic book villain. So we'll just call him the Agent of Liberty. It's kind of sad that he ended up killing Fiona. It's interesting because he was like, we didn't draw you here. I guess Fiona, because remember Fiona was trying to get people together, kind of like a neighborhood watch for aliens, because here's a list of aliens. So maybe she kind of ended up diving too deeply into something, looking into something she shouldn't have looked into, got some information, ended up tracking it back to there, maybe tying stuff from the attack on the bar there, and that's how she ended up finding her way there. Because it seemed like it's not like they got her there or captured her. It's like she was probably snooping around and they captured her. But it's still kind of sad that they just for her to die like that too, dude. Because it's interesting, because another element to this episode is the whole John situation, because John doesn't want to fight because of the promise he made to his dad. He wants to find a peaceful way to handling things. I mean, I'm sure that's going to be something that comes up as the season progresses. Like whether, like, at what point, yes, you can have the. It's going to be that ultimate debate between, like, you know, obviously violence begets more violence, but there are moments where you might not have a choice in it. You have to step up and fight, you know, but for him, he wants to put his days behind. Because I was curious. I wasn't expecting to see John this season at all. I didn't know he was going to play an element in this. And I saw him, I was like, oh, so you probably are going to be in this season. Because when he walked away from the DEO, I wasn't, but he's going to be kind of on the street levels, you know, getting information, trying to help out aliens and stuff like that, spread the word of peace, you know. So, like I said, I'm very interested to see what happens in that regard, because especially as someone like John, because he is a warrior, he's a fighter, much like Supergirl. So I'm curious to see, you know, is there going to be a limit that eventually goes to the point where he has no choice but to fight, and what that, you know, will mean for his beliefs currently, you know, because he'll probably feel like if he does it, because I think in some regards, if you don't, like, you literally will have to physically fight sometimes to keep peace. But maybe that's something John will kind of learn as the season progresses, or maybe, like he was kind of suggesting, maybe he'll kind of find another way in all this. We'll see. Then there was also that interesting thing about the train that Kara stopped. Because at first I was like, oh, what is it? It's like, oh, yeah, the tracks falling apart was because they had the other car, like, punching underneath the ground for whatever reasons. Like I brought up before, I was curious about it, but I think I've heard some stuff here and there kind of confirming what I thought. Like, they are basically doing the Red Sun storyline, which I don't know if it operated in this exact manner, because I'm pretty sure the whole storyline of, like, the Red Sun, it's like, no, like, that all happened, like, there was no, like, other Superman. It's like, no, Superman landed in, like, Siberia or Russia and grew up there. So it's just like the one Superman did that. Like the whole, like, there being two cars, like, it's just, it seems like that's probably them kind of adapting it and putting their own little twist to it, I think. That's how I feel about it. So I'm curious to see what that ends up all being about. Like I said, we've got, like, well, two fronts already kind of set up in that regard. Obviously, this whole Agent of Liberty situation, and now this other Kara thing, that's probably going to be heavily working in the background. So we'll have to wait and see on that front. Then, like I said, this whole Lena and Jimmy situation, I am very excited to see what this season has in store for us. I'm very excited to see what the next episode, what happens in the next episode with all of this. And now moving on to this week's episode of The Walking Dead. Okay, so a lot of interesting things went down in this episode. First of all, you have Michonne coming back because there's a whole situation of, like, oh yeah, we got to get the food from Hilltop for the sanctuary, but the sanctuary stuff, the ethanol hasn't showed up, which that was kind of another interesting thing that I'm kind of, well, I'll go ahead and talk about it now. The fact is, I like that. Kind of from the very beginning, they're kind of hinting like, oh yeah, there's something up with that, because there's people that walked off. But one of the people from the sanctuary tells Rick later on, it's like, honestly, they didn't just walk off. Some of those people had families back home and they just never came back to the sanctuary. If they had families, you'd think they would come back. So yeah, obviously kind of showing that maybe someone is coming to get them. Obviously, we, you know, like I skip him around and stuff like that, because we see at the end of the episode with Justin, when someone grabs him. You think if they were going to kill him, they would have killed him right then and there, but maybe that's kind of like they're kind of drawing people in, like maybe someone else is picking up, but it's like, or maybe that's something else entirely. Maybe they took him out so that they could kill him later on. Maybe they're trying to pump the sanctuary people for information, something like that, maybe, you know, kind of torturing it or something. So it could be potentially what that turns out to be, but I'll kind of possibly circle back to that at the end of everything. But nevertheless, it's a whole situation with Maggie and Michonne, because the whole situation of like, well, they have a surplus of food, but they don't want to give it to the sanctuary because of the fact of the matter is because they don't have the ethanol, they don't have the fuel, they can't turn on a tractor, meaning they can't plant stuff in the field. And there's the plow, but they don't have a blacksmith to work on it because their blacksmith, Earl, Ken's dad, is locked up for what he did. Also, turns out it's been a month. It's very interesting. I mean, I guess with a lot of the stuff that's going down this season, I feel like I don't feel like they really. Maybe I'm not remembering, but I feel like the timeline was. I mean, I guess at any point in time, a lot of time could have passed in between episodes, but I feel like this is the first time they've ever really actively brought up the fact that it's like it's been a while in between episodes, like from episode 1 to now being a month like that. It just kind of seemed like an interesting time skip, but nevertheless, I guess it also fits into like the narrative of like, yeah, kind of getting past all of like a lot of the labor stuff you have to see, but nevertheless. It brings up an interesting situation because it's like, okay, Michonne's like, I know what Earl did to you and to you and Ian, and so I can't tell you like, oh, just let him go. But the fact of the matter is, him being locked up isn't just affecting Hilltop, which Maggie quickly is like, Hilltop would be fine because once again, it's like that food is also for other people because the Hilltop is the only one that can really produce food because it turns out like Alexandria has the ammunition, Hilltop has the greens, essentially, the what's grown, and then like Oceanside handles the fish and stuff like that. So essentially, Michonne starts talking about like essentially like there has to be because there's no laws in place. It's kind of interesting. Did Alexandria originally ever have any laws? I mean, I guess it more so focuses on the fact is the Hilltop never had any, because let's not forget like Rick was the sheriff of Alexandria back in season 4. Wasn't it? Yeah, like 5 when they originally got there. So, but it's like the Hilltops never really had rules. Just the way it was established. And because Maggie's trying to figure out how she handles everything, Tammy's not able to see her husband, and Earl is all she has left now that Ken's gone. And Jesus kind of agrees with everything. But even he's kind of like, yeah, Gregory, that. Because the question then becomes like, well, did Maggie kill Gregory because it's like, oh, she did it for herself, or did she do it for everyone else, or did she do it for both? That's the ultimate question. But at the same time, it doesn't matter. All that matters in this particular situation, he's like, Tammy should be able to see her husband. She's a grieving wife. She has the right to see her husband. But the thing is, Maggie's in that complicated situation of trying to figure things out, especially considering it's like, hey, he tried to kill her, so it's advisable that she needs a little time to figure things out. What's also interesting, too, is they bring up the Georgie situation of like, oh, yeah, she's constantly coming to Maggie to join them, which I'm surprised we haven't seen that kind of come back in a bigger manner this season. Like, after everything they gave like to the group last season, it's like you knew they were going to, you had an inkling like, they're probably going to come back a big way this season, so they might have something to do with all the people disappearing, especially the sanctuary people. But that's the question, if they were doing all that, why wouldn't they go get their families immediately if they were kind of joining up with like Georgie's group or something like that? Like I said, not unless there's something happening in secret. I kind of feel like it's more like they're probably being killed or being tortured, then killed for information. Like I said, we'll have to wait and see on that, but ultimately, Maggie's mind did kind of get changed about everything because she ended up hearing the story from Earl. And it's actually kind of a sad story, after letting Tammy see her husband, that basically he hadn't touched alcohol in 20 years, and you kind of hear the story about it, which is kind of a sad story. And the reason why Maggie changed her mind was because Herschel had a drinking, he drank, but if he wasn't given a second chance, none of, a lot of good people wouldn't be where they are right now. Like, everyone can agree, because even Michonne's like, I'm one of those people. Like, all the great things that Herschel did, like, a lot of people wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for him being who he was, so that's what kind of made her decide to change things for, Earl. And there's also like a system kind of put in play. There's also the interesting thing of like, why did you kill Gregory and not me? Like, I was the one who actually hurt you. I was in a weakened state. He didn't talk me into doing it. I just did it on my own. To be fair, Gregory still manipulated you into doing it, so he was still kind of guilty. But she's like, was I wrong to kill him? And she's like, no. And then she's like, good. So, and even because even Maggie admits, like, yeah, common law is going to be set in place and stuff like that, but I don't regret killing Gregory. It's like he was given a chance after chance, which he was. Gregory continued to be a piece of shit. We can all face it. So that's what leaves you so conflicted, because it's like, Gregory doing what he's done has led to people getting hurt and killed, and it's just kind of like it would have gotten more and more disastrous. Like Enid could have died because of what he set up with that whole situation, or trying to get Maggie killed. I mean, hell, he even literally tried to finally do it himself after a failed attempt. So it's kind of like there was no changing him, but it's like it's hard to say because there's the whole, obviously there's a comparison between him and Negan, because that's ultimately what Maggie's like saying. Like some people, can't deserve a chance, they can change, but other people don't. She's kind of referencing Negan, but at the same time, Michonne's like, who really gets to make that decision? She's like, ultimately, I guess we'll just kind of have to wait to see who it will be, and it's just kind of like, because once again, it kind of goes back to it, like, did she kill him just because she was just pissed at him? Once again, it's just kind of interesting because you do see that change. Like, she's one of the people that was willing to give Gregory multiple chances, and, did she afford Negan the same thing? It's like Negan did a lot of terrible things, but so did Gregory, but Gregory didn't do as many things to the terrible degree that Negan did. Also, Gregory wasn't the one that killed her husband and the father of her child, so it's kind of like you can understand, like, so it's that situation of like it's a combination of just being personal, and that line between what is right for everybody else and just what's right for you, that line gets super blurry in this situation. So that's why it leaves me very conflicted, because I don't know. Like, I kind of lean like I would probably go along with, like, when it, especially to Gregory, Negan too, like the whole, like, I would probably side with Maggie, but I do understand the aspect of like, that's not who we have to be. We can kind of build this society again. We don't, especially with the laws and stuff like that. So just outright killing someone isn't right without some, it's just like we can't just outright kill people like that. That just shouldn't be who we are, type of thing. So, like I said, it's just kind of an interesting conversation. Along the same lines, you have things kind of falling apart to a certain degree when it comes to the different groups, especially with the sanctuary, just because they're butting heads with a lot of people, and that brings up a lot of questions. But Daryl kind of brings up a lot of stuff because it's like, oh, they don't get punished for it, and Rick is like, I understand, but the fact of the matter is they make up most of the labor for this whole bridge situation. So if we don't keep them, good, like things good, like, hey, like they're, I get it, we have issues with them, but the fact of the matter is once we get this job done, then we have to worry about it as much. Because Rick is kind of like, we're all kind of going towards a goal. We're all on the same side. But even like Daryl's like, are we? Because for him, it's like, even though we don't get well together now, and because even Carol's like, well, yeah, I agree with Daryl. We can't forget the past. You're asking these people to kind of live together, people who've never lived together, who have such a heated past. But he's like, I don't want you to forget the past. We don't need to forget the past. We need to learn from the past, but also be able to move forward together. And it's like, if we go forward together, eventually we'll grow together and come together. But Daryl feels like, he's like, I've been trying to tell you that things aren't right, and you're just not willing to listen. So that's why he has a little bit of animosity towards Rick in that regard. Kind of going to Justin just kind of messing up multiple times. He pushes Henry around because it's like Henry won't give him more water, but it's like, dude, like there's a limit on the water, and you're just pushing a kid around. It's like, come on. I was kind of like, yeah, it's a good thing Henry kind of kicked your ass, kind of knocked you on the feet, which was pretty cool. I also like the fact is that when it was all said, and like the whole like Ezekiel and Carol kind of being like parents to him, and she's like, aren't you forgetting something? And he comes over and kisses her. She's like, oh, I meant this, but okay. It's like, is he getting taller? I think he's getting taller. It's like soon he'll be going off to college and everything. Like this cute little like American dream type of family, it's just kind of like, oh, white picket fence and stuff like that. That's, except for, no white picket fences, and a whole bunch of zombies, but you get what I'm trying to say. So, but, yeah, just the animosity between the different groups kind of rising, especially. It was kind of interesting because I was wondering about that. It's like, oh man, the second siren didn't go off. I was like, oh man, this has something to do with some of the people disappearing. Turns out the person behind it was Justin, but the radio was not charged or whatever, and Justin didn't do his due diligence because he kind of didn't care. He was just doing his own thing. It's kind of like, oh, it's not my it's like, no, like what you're playing a part in something that would mean like everyone's safety. I also love the fact is of what was it that Tara gave him the code name? Mother Goose, and Rick's like, Mother Goose? She's like, yeah, that other name you had was like kind of sucky. So I was like, no, we could do better. I thought that was kind of pretty nice. But he failed in that regard, and like luckily no one died. Granted, Aaron ended up getting his arm stuck and ended up having to get amputated by Enid. And I also thought that was kind of interesting. Sadiq was teaching, Enid's kind of becoming the new medic, and she handled it. I was like, because I think that was a good moment, because you can kind of see she was a little worried and nervous about doing it. But even Aaron was like, you got this, you can do it. And I was like, oh man. Which interesting, all that Herschel talk kind of makes me think about when Herschel got his leg cut off. So it's also interesting because, obviously Aaron's doing the whole like father thing right now too. And he's kind of loving it, even suggesting that Daryl might be a father. I'm curious, is that kind of like foreshadowing anything? Maybe not. Because I'm sure Daryl never, like the way he kind of laughs it off and stuff like that, I guess it's something he's never really thought about before. But I love Rick kicking Justin out because it's like, oh, no, I've come across people like, you're going to stand here, you're going to listen to everything I say. Fact is, pack your crap and go. And if I ever see you again, the fact of the matter is stitches won't be enough to fix what I'm going to do to you. I'm like, whoa, Rick. Getting scared because he blames himself, because for him it's like, I put this project first and like I just been pushing everyone. I'm kind of like trying to make everyone fit together, like pieces that don't quite fit together. I'm kind of slamming them together, trying to meet this deadline, get this bridge situation kind of fixed up. But the fact of the matter is, it's like, he's like, I shouldn't have done all that. And then, Aaron tells him, like, the fact of the matter, when the dead started rising, I just assumed it was the end. But look at what you're doing. You're building a brand new world. You're showing us that the world isn't over, that we can build something new, a new beginning. And I thought that was kind of beautiful. It's also interesting because they kept saying that, considering the fact is the first episode of the season is called A New Beginning. And that was also like the thing of like, it's kind of interesting because it's all falling apart to a certain degree. Like, obviously it's less and less, but eventually it's going to spread out and become more and more as things kind of get worse. Because there's even that conversation Rick has with Negan, which I think is so fascinating, about the fact is that Negan's kind of like, you're pretending like all this is going to work just because at the end of the day, everyone sat down and they were fine for a little bit. Eventually, this is all going to go crashing down. And why don't you come back to me that day? It basically is almost saying that Rick, it's like you go out there and do what you got to do. You paved a way for me to come back and take control of this whole thing. And I thought that was so interesting, because he's like, oh yeah, because you're thinking you're building this world for everyone else. It's like, no, you're building it for Carl, aren't you? And Rick's like, don't you ever say his name again, because he's also like, that bridge you're building is a monument to the dead. It's not like you're really building anything of substance. You're building something almost in memory of all the dead people, rather than kind of building something to survive. You're just building, I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting, I don't quite 100% get what he was kind of getting at by that. I guess it's just kind of, like, you're building something to make all the depths prior to this kind of mean something, I guess. It's just kind of like, oh, the groundwork that was laid by those who lost their lives to kind of get us to where we are now. So, I don't know. I just thought that was kind of very interesting, like his perspective on it like that. I kind of glossed over it earlier, but I do want to talk about the whole situation when Aaron's arm got caught. It actually didn't play out the way I thought it would, because it's like the moment the guy was like, oh, we got to get out of here, and the log fell, he pushed or pulled that other guy out of the way, and the log ended up landing on him. I thought the other, sanctuary people were just going to go. The dude that was busting, what's his face? Justin's balls for Henry kind of taking him down. I thought he was going to run. It's like, no, he was there. They all stayed long enough to help. And then reinforcements arrived and killed the walker. So I thought that's kind of pretty interesting. Some other things I liked in this episode is the whole Ezekiel and Carol thing. And she's like, you still carrying that O-ring around. I might well try it on. Ezekiel's about to get on one day. She's like, no. What are you doing? He's like, no, come on. I wrote a whole speech. She's like, I'm sure you did, but you can tell me that later, because she didn't want to turn into a whole spectacle and thing like that. So I thought that was kind of cute. Also, there's a whole Anne and Gabriel thing, and I thought that was kind of pretty nice. The kind of bond between them, because they are in similar situations. Kind of Anne's like, it's because of you and Rick and Morgan that gave me a chance, and I'm here right now. And it's like, oh, look at her draw, because she's drawing because she kind of feels like she doesn't have a place in the group. But Gabriel's like, yeah, you do, because he understands, like, well, obviously with his backstory and everything. It's like, oh yeah, like, they are similar in a sense, but it took Rick coming to both of them to change their mind, make them kind of be a better person. And what I also thought was kind of interesting too is, like the woman that Anne was drawing for Gabriel. It's like, oh no, that's his organist. And I was like, what is, it's like, she's someone from the church. And obviously we know what happened to his church and his flock. So I'm sure, like, he said, like, he kind of just labeled it as like, oh yeah, I was afraid and lost her. So he didn't really probably go into specifics because neither one is going too specific. It's like, no, I'll tell you about my past. I just won't tell you about my secrets. And then there being a theme between them, I'm like, oh, look at all these pairings are getting together. I was like, oh, that's pretty nice. What's also interesting too, and it's just me kind of reading too much into it. It's also interesting because Gabriel's got the whole, messed up eye thing. So it's like, only got like half the vision. It's kind of interesting because Anne does have secrets, and she sees that plane high in the sky. She still hasn't told anyone about like whatever the hell it was she was connected to before that she knew about from that her group that she was originally part of, like that junkyard. Like there was more to that and everything, and she's not saying what she knows. Why? I have no idea. Was she lying about the whole teacher thing, or was there more to it than that? Like, definitely, like, Anne's probably got, like, the biggest secrets, but I feel like she's not saying anything to anyone, because there's a plane that was overhead, so is she just biding her time for something, or what? Is she just waiting for the right time to let the information out, or will she actually tell Rick about it? I don't know, like, maybe she told him in between seasons, I doubt it, but hey, we'll kind of have to wait and see. It don't seem like it. Also, I was just checking my notes too. I completely forgot about like Rick doing the badass thing of like shooting those logs and then them proceeding to wipe out a large number of those walkers. I think that's also just that moment of just being like, oh, that's brutal when you see it like run over their head and like smash their heads up, and it's kind of like, ugh. I don't know, stuff like that kind of, I don't know, it gets me sometimes. Like smashed heads just, I think that's why, I guess because, I think that's why the whole like Lucille situation. Which begs the question, where the hell is Lucille now that he's kind of locked up? I'd assume, like, if I was, like, Rick, I'd be carrying that around. That's also another interesting thing, too, I forgot to talk about, was, like, I'm kind of glad I brought that up and circled back around to it. Because when that dude was talking to Rick, because Rick is like, no, the Sanctuary doesn't need their weapons. In fact, the matter is, we kind of took their weapons from them on purpose. They are literally the only group that doesn't have their weapons. And even at this point in time, it's kind of interesting, because we still haven't really seen, like, what remains of the Kingdom's Force. We've seen bits and pieces here and there, but not the full of like scale of what's left of the Kingdom's forces. But the dude was kind of like, oh, I get it. You'll protect them if they work for you, huh? Sound like someone else we know. And it's like, okay, kind of making the comparisons there. So it's like, you don't want to go too deep, too far in that direction. You might go in Negan territory. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting thing that the dude from Sanctuary was kind of pointing out. So I'm very interested to see where this all goes in the next episode, especially like what that whole Justin thing, as well as the people from the Sanctuary disappeared. Because it's like, why is it specifically them? Because everyone's just kind of like, oh, those are walkouts. But it's like, obviously there's something else going on there. Is it just because, to be fair, the Sanctuary are the only ones without, like, well, guns. They have weapons to defend themselves, sure, but not, something so I guess if they get caught off guard. Because obviously it was also interesting too, because I can't forget, when it came to Justin, he recognized who it was. He's like, man, you almost get, it's like, so it's someone he knows. So it must be someone else from the Sanctuary. So some of them might have gone off to do that off on their own, or got hooked up with some other group and they're coming back to recruit other people. I don't know. Like I said, we'll just kind of have to ultimately wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.